Welcome back to the table. Today, Emily and I are going to be giving you a full review of Woodcraft. This is the newest game from Delicious Games, Valimir Suchy, and Ross Arnold. It's a co-design. This is the second co-design he's had in a couple years. Messina was a co-design.
That's true.
And this one is too. And from what I understand, Ross brought this game to them and they developed it quite a bit more.
Oh, nice.
To become what it is sitting here in front of us. Now, I'm going to give you a quick overview. Truth be told, we recorded this review already. It was 40 minutes. We didn't want to put you through that. So we're not going to give you a full thorough overview, but we do want to give you sort of the elevator pitch on what the game is doing if you're not familiar already. If you couldn't figure it out, you are Woodcrafters. It is set in this beautiful sort of almost fantasy-esque world where we're these people. We have a wood shop. We have this wheel out here, which is where we're going to be taking our actions to get all the things done that we need to get done. Mm-hmm. What are we doing? Well, we're fulfilling orders. Now, it's not just a order fulfillment game, but you are going to be doing that. And to do that, you're going to be using these dice. And you're not really rolling your dice.
No, do not roll them.
Don't roll them. They're going to be manipulated, though, in a very cool and thematic way, because in any good wood shop, you've got glue, you've got saws, you've got all sorts of things to sort of manipulate the dice. So you're going to be cutting dice, trying to make it maybe from a 5 to a 2 and a 3. You might be gluing dice together to make them big dice, because the orders that you're fulfilling have to be fulfilled. Exactly. It's one of the key things that we're going to talk about here in a minute, because this isn't a game that is pleasant and lets you sort of overshoot and do, and it's all flexible.
No flexibility, not here.
It is a tight game. Some might even say suffocating. In particular, compared to the theme.
Yes.
And sort of the vibe that's going on, it feels very tight. Last thing on the game, we did mention this wheel where you're going to be taking your actions. We're not going to talk about all the actions here, but on your turn, you're taking one of these action tiles, doing the action, and then moving it to this next sector.
As far as it'll go.
Yeah, as far as it will go. So the actions will start stacking up in these different sectors. Also, this saw blade is going to eventually move with those tiles as sectors get cleared out. You're going to take the action, and then as they stack up, they might be next to some bonuses, and you're going to take some bonuses. That's also a very big part of this game. And if you're familiar with Vladimir's last game, or one of his last games, Praga, he had a wheel that feels a little bit to us like maybe the birthplace of what this has become.
Yeah.
It's not exactly the same, but it definitely gives you a little bit of that vibe. It feels like this may be a more perfected version of that.
Definitely. Are you good with overview?
I think we're good with overview.
I want to jump right in.
I'd ask you right now, but you're not here. But yes, we're going to jump right in and talk about what we like about the game, some of our concerns about the game. And then in doing so, I think you'll get a little bit better idea of exactly what you're doing in detail.
Yes. So I just want to go right into what you were talking about, the wheel. One of my favorite parts of this game is definitely the action selection wheel. And like you said, if you liked Praga because you liked that action selection wheel, you liked how you were getting to make crunchy decisions between ooh, I want to take this action, but I also don't want to set it up so that David gets this action bonus, or this action has a great bonus right now, I can't really pass it up. This game has that in spades, and I would say it does it even better than Praga.
Oh, by far. I would say, not to bash Praga on this front, but Praga I always felt actually didn't quite pay off on that.
Yeah.
Because, first thing, the bonuses in Praga were not as wide of a variety of bonuses. They didn't bring the flavor that these bonuses do. They also didn't bring the juice that some of them do, because some of these bonuses, when things really stack up, are big, and in some cases worth taking the action because of the bonus.
Definitely. There are times where you're like, I really don't need that action at all, but look in the middle, it's giving me points and another die, which I can use as wood, and sometimes at the bottom, it's giving me an extra bonus as well. So honestly, I'd rather just eat the action, take all the bonuses, and they have mitigation within the game from different resources like lanterns that allow you to take different moves. So you have some tiny bits of flexibility there if you can accrue them.
Little bit.
But it definitely makes one of the best decisions on your turn to be, what am I going to do, right? And not just what action do I want to take, but which specifically piece of this board do I want to take and move, and what will that do to set up everyone else?
Yeah, the other interesting, and I would agree, that the wheel is really cool. It works really well. One thing, just to explain a little bit about how the wheel works, as you're pulling these tiles and things get stacked up, you could take a lot of the same actions over and over, or everyone around the table could take some of the same actions, and that tile is just going to slowly move around to this quadrant here. But it's not going to move into a quadrant that already has tiles in it if it's beyond this green dial right here.
Yep.
So this dial is going to sort of move around as tiles go past it, but a tile cannot go past that green dial if there are tiles in the very next quadrant. So what that does is it forces players to kind of use all of the actions. And you will use all of the actions, and that is the one other big difference I want to point out between this and Praga's wheel, is the variety of not only the bonuses, but the variety of the actions is far greater in this. Like, it's been a while since I've played Praga, but it really just boils down to a handful of the actions that
and
you
you usually
take.
had options between one of two actions to take. So, but here, you're taking one action. Like, this is the one action it allows you to do. That's what you're doing for that one. And none of the other ones allow you to do it. Like, if you want to do upgrades, you have to get the upgrade one. There's none of the other ones let you do upgrade. Nowhere else in the game lets you do upgrades. You have to take the upgrade tile.
And that brings in one of the other suffocating things. Like I said, as tiles move around, if some of the original tiles haven't been taken, and there's this one action that everyone's been taking, gets up here, then no one can take that action, quote unquote, until other actions are taken. And like Emily said, there is some things that allow you to do that. You can use the lantern to move a different tile, but still take the action of another, which is nice. But again, these lanterns, while they offer that flexibility, they're not pouring like a waterfall all over you. I mean, you're not going to get a lot of these lanterns. And there's a couple different uses. You can use one to do what I just said. But if you save up and have three...
Ooh, if you have three, you basically get to take another action.
Yeah,
right?
You get another action.
2 for 1.
And this game has 14 actions in the entire game. So if you can save up 3, maybe save up 3 again and get 2 more actions, that is, in the economy of actions, a big additional set of actions compared to just having the base 14.
So my favorite thing is the wheel. What do you like about it, David?
My favorite thing by far is the way this game integrates its theme into the mechanisms. Never seen anything like this before. It blows me away that no one's done this, not even with this theme, but with any other theme. Dice mitigation happens in all sorts of games. But in this, your dice is your lumber. You're using different types of lumber to fulfill these orders. For instance, I have this order right here that requires 2 brown 2s and some glue, which we haven't talked about, but there's a bunch of extra resources that you need to get some things done sometimes. But right now I have a brown 1, a yellow 2, and a green 3. If I had a brown 4, one of the cool things you can do in this game is use a saw blade, as a free action, mind you, to cut that 4 into 2 brown 2s. Now I have my 2 brown 2s for this order.
You can fulfill your order.
Now, say I needed something else where I needed something bigger. Well, then you could use glue, again as a free action, to glue 2 different dice together, getting a number. And in fact, in that case, they give you a little bonus if you're making sort of like a hybrid piece of lumber.
Using different
kinds. With 2 different colors, you can still go up to the higher value, but you can choose which color it is, and you get bonus points for doing that. So you're sawing lumber, you're gluing it together, you're taking
scrap wood even.
Little pieces of scrap wood and adding it. These are basically adding pips to die. So you can add a pip, but you can even upgrade your workshop so that when you use a scrap wood, you could do 1 pip, maybe you could do up to 2, maybe you could do up to 4 pips, which is a big deal in this game because the economy, and Emily said this, I'm going to steal her thunder a little bit. This is not a game that's necessarily just about the order fulfillment. Absolutely. What is it about?
Resource management.
Like nobody's business is about resource management. And that's not just the lumber, but it does start with the lumber because you are trying to manipulate the lumber. And once you use it, you don't have it. So you want to sort of manage that in and of itself, which kind of comes down to one other thing you can do in this game that feels incredibly thematic. And that is plant trees in these pots down here.
Take a little sapling, watch it grow.
When you plant a tree, which is one of the actions, you're taking one of the die. You get a free split in this case. So I could take this green 3 and change it to a 2 and a 1. I could store either the 2 or the 1 and then put the other one down here in this pot. And at the beginning of every one of my turns, it's going to pip up 2 pips. So if you can do this, and I only have a pot for green at the beginning, but you can get a yellow and a brown so that you can sort of have a revolving supply if you manage it correctly.
You have to manage it correctly.
You absolutely do. I have not done that in many of my games. But if you can manage that, you're not going to run out of lumber. And we'd mentioned earlier that this is a very tight and sometimes suffocating game. Well, I want to make the point that it's not about instant gratification. So when it comes to those orders, in most games, you have an order. You're like, okay, this is the things I need to do this order.
Yeah.
As soon as you have those things,
check.
You generally do it.
And you can do it right away on your turn.
You absolutely can. You can do that. That's another sort of free action, is just fulfilling an order if you have what you need. But in this game, the orders are going to sort of age. So as you get orders, they go along the side of your board here. And at certain phases in the game, there's 4 income phases, and a lot of things happen. One of the things that happens is all your orders that are unfulfilled move down this. So you're going to get sort of decreasing benefits.
Value, yeah.
You'll always get the value from what is the rewards on the order, but the rewards on the side of the board will decrease. And in fact, if you wait too long, they go down to negative points, or maybe a loss on the reputation track which will then can be very bad. But in this game, maybe if you have this stuff, you want to wait. So if I have those 2 brown 2s already, maybe I want to plant one of them.
Yep.
And make it bigger, and especially if I have a saw blade, so I make it a little bit bigger, and then I cut it back down to a 2. Now I can fulfill this, and I still have a leftover die for maybe another order.
Yes.
And those are the sorts of things that you want to contemplate. You can't really think about like seizing those opportunities, because one thing we've learned, or I've learned probably more than Emily, because she never made the mistake, is if you run out of die, it's tough. If you run out of die and blueberries,
which are money.
Yeah, by the way, we haven't mentioned blueberries are what you're spending in this game, which is adorable. But if you run out low on blueberries and lumber, you could find yourself in trouble where you're spending a couple actions of those 14 just kind of getting back to a place where you can do anything.
And the thing is that I know sometimes you can do that in a lot of games, right? Get to this place where you're kind of stuck. And a lot of time that can be just from our first playthrough, not knowing what you're doing. But I think even when you've played this game, or even if you think you're doing things that are good, like, oh, look, I fulfilled an order. That is a good thing, right? Somehow then you're in this bad spot where I don't have any resources. Now, what do I do? Because I don't have any resources, and you have to take these less optimal actions that don't feel as good because you're just trying to get back some money and some wood so you can start doing stuff with your shop again.
Right. In fact, as we were preparing for this review, I've played this now 5 or 6 times, and even still today, I was contemplating this game, really thinking about it, and some of the things that I'd never done in the game. I had never used glue too much.
I used glue.
Because, by the way, in terms of tightness, getting all the orders done, that's somewhat tight. Managing your resources, even tighter. Thinking that you're going to get everything done.
You're not.
It's not going to happen. You're going to upgrade your workshop. You're going to hire helpers for your workshop. You're going to collect tools, which we haven't even discussed, in your attic, which is effectively just sort of a bonus game.
There's a whole marketing track you can go up to get more points. There are achievements. There's so much going on in this game. And honestly, one of my biggest drawbacks for this game is that I feel like, especially when you first teach it, it can be a little misleading.
Yes.
Because you're thinking, like David talked about, you're thinking, oh, this is order fulfillment. I'm just going to fulfill orders right away. Don't do that. We do not advise that. It's really more resource management. But also, like, you see all this stuff going on. There is a little bit of engine building, especially with the helpers, but not as much as you would think.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, you do have new cards coming out, new orders, new helpers in the second half of the game. But really, like, it doesn't ramp as much as you think you're going to be able to ramp. And so you have to be still, again, really efficient in order to be making things happen. So if you're going there thinking like, oh, and later on I'll get my 3rd saw, and then I'll do another plant, and then I'll do this thing, the game's going to be over, and you're going to have done one of those things maybe.
Yeah, a lot of people will sit down and see, okay, well, I've got 1 saw. We have a place for 2 more. I've got a place for these or this. Oh, I can get 2 more pots for trees. And, oh, look at all these areas that I can fill up. And, well, not only that, you could look over at the stacks of cards, order cards. So both the helpers and the orders have 2 decks. There's one for the first half of the game, one for the second half of the game. Both of these decks are pretty healthy.
Yes.
So any gamer is typically going to sit down and look at that and go, oh, well, clearly I need to get orders. And that is an action you can take in the game.
You can.
In fact, when you take it, you could take 1 order, or you could spend blueberries and take 2 orders. And if you've played any Euro, you think to yourself when you see that, oh, it's probably optimal
To spend the
to
money.
spend the
get a little
blueberries to
more.
get 2 orders. Well, in all the times we've played this, you
know
beat
that
me the first game with
I've
5
done
orders.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you start with 4 orders, and getting 4 orders done even by the end of game
Can be hard.
be tricky. So you're not going to get a bunch of orders. So the game kind of puts forth a bit of an air of like, look at all the things that you can do.
You can do so much, so many options, but you can't do so much.
They're options.
They're just options.
That's the key phrase is options. No, you're not going to do all of them, so just get used to that. Now, on the flip side of that being sort of like maybe a con, it also gives you the opportunity to sort of explore the game over and over and over. And if you're going to play this game a lot, I think this game is going to get better and better as you play it. I think it's safe to say we both liked it, even our first play. But I do think it gets better, especially for me, because I do horribly on a game like this. Because I absolutely just fulfilled those orders immediately when I could. But I continue to learn, like I was about to say, with the gluing. There's a format here. The dice cost different things. So brown die or brown lumber is really expensive, whereas green lumber is cheap. If you had glue early on,
smush them together.
you
now
could
you get
actually
brown.
get a little tiny 1 brown and a 5 green, and boom, get a 6 brown for maybe a little bit better of an economy there. Again, something had not even occurred to me.
I did that in our first game too.
Did you really?
Yeah, and when you did it too, you got 4 points for doing it.
Yes.
So again, you're thinking like, okay, all my points are really going to come from this order fulfillment. And like this one that I have out doesn't even give any points. It only gives me blueberries.
Right.
And so like, you could be getting all your points from all these different little other things going on in the game. There are income tracks where you're getting points as well. There's reputation that can make the orders worth something. There's so much kind of piling on together. But again, each play you can do something different. You can't do all of it. You can never do all of it.
Yeah, well, and the fact is, you don't necessarily even have the choice 100% of what you want to do, because certain areas on these things, it really depends on what cards are coming out. And then, of course, if you're playing with other people, which most of us are, it depends on what they take and leave for you. So one of the things in particular is this attic area where you sort of collect tools. And these tools are effectively just random tool icons that you set on there. And as you collect them in pyramid fashion, you're going to unlock these bonuses. Well, to get those tools, most of them are found on order cards. You have one right here. But a bunch of order cards might come out with very few of those.
Or with none, like yours doesn't have any.
Yeah, in fact, I have none of my initial 4 orders have that. So at the beginning of the game, I'm thinking to myself, maybe I'm not going to do that. But in another game, you might have done that and had a really juicy turn. So you really want to strive for that. But you might just have to adjust and go in a different direction, kind of whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
You really need to look at what's going on the table.
I would say, too, what you talked about with the players really makes a difference. Like, player count even can make a difference, right?
Oh, yeah.
We play this at 2-player, and it feels very, like, tactical. Like, you're like, okay, I don't want to let David do this, and Dave doesn't want to let me do this, so we kind of keep moving things incrementally. But when you play with 4, you don't really have that kind of like ability to look at what everybody's doing, so you're kind of just making the best decision for you. But what ends up happening is some of these end up being really juicy bonuses.
Oh yeah.
Or like better cards are left out, or like you're just in a situation where it can be really good or it could be really bad. You could be like, I've been trying to do upgrades for so long, but someone always keeps taking it and I can never upgrade. Well, now you have to do a different strategy than maybe what you originally planned.
Yeah, and I will say that I think one big difference, and I think you just hit on it, between player count is at higher player counts, you're going to be forced, all the players are going to be forced into different channels a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because of what you just said. Some things might move and you might not be able to take as optimal of a version of the action.
Right.
You can almost always take whatever action you want, particularly if you have some lanterns. But you want to take the most optimal.
Yeah.
And like we said, you're going to look at that wheel and think, oh, I kind of wanted to do that. That's my goal. But boy, there's these 2 other actions that have these bonuses. Maybe I can do that next time.
It reminds me of, so I know playing this game with Ryan, he loves optimizing, and you'd see his face and I'd be like, well, why don't you just do that? He's like, yeah, I mean, I could do that. But what I really wanted to do was, and that's basically sums up this game, is like, yeah, you could do that, but what I wanted to do was make this big, perfect move, but it is very difficult to do that.
Yeah, and it really is amazing how differently people can play this game. I think one time when we did play with Ryan, he didn't even put a new pot down
Which
here.
is wild to me. I always go for potting plants.
It does seem kind of crazy, but again, I think the scores in that game between the two of you were actually pretty close with wildly different strategies. So hopefully we've given you an idea of how we feel with our words. We are going to give a number on this. We'll each give a score. And I will cite the fact that I really like what this game is doing. Personally, the tight nature of it is not my favorite thing in the world.
Sure.
I like games where you can just go crazy and do as much and as possible on every single turn. This doesn't let you do that. You have to be quite a bit more efficient with this game.
Well, it's like woodcrafting, right? Like you mentioned that before too,
Yes.
that it's like you measure twice, cut once, you're really slowly, deliberately like making these things. You don't have any big like, zoom, zoom, did that. You have like, I slowly built up this little ore that I made for you with my little snake.
Yeah, well, I can't tell you enough how adorable the game is. These order cards have like little woodland creatures in them,
adorable.
and it's a wide variety. I don't think there's a repeat order card in there.
I haven't seen
all these different wooden products, which is really cool. But to my score, I'm going to give this game a 7. It is, I think, almost an 8, but it is a 7 for sure. I would probably give it higher, except for me personally, that tight nature is something that I'm not smart enough to get around. Like if I was smart, but with that said, it is a game that falls into that category for me that I want to play more to see if I can get better. And some games like that, I don't. Some games I'm like, I don't want to invest the time to try to get better at this. This one, I think I will. This will hit the table more for me.
I was honestly surprised after our first play that you kept playing it so much because
I played it a lot.
Because this isn't usually David's type of game, and then he was like, he just kept playing it, and so I was surprised. But I will say I'm on the same page with you. My score is also a 7. I would say a high 7, but I really enjoy what's going on in the game and what we're able to do. But it doesn't, like we've talked about, it doesn't have like a huge payoff. There's not like these like combo-tastic turns or big things you're doing. It's really about consistency. And so like you're able to get points throughout the game and kind of build something throughout what you're doing, which is fun and nice to do, and you feel good at the end for all you've accomplished. But at the same time, I feel like I leave the game sometimes wanting to like be able to do even more. Like I look at it, I'm like, oh, I didn't get to do anything in my attic this time. Or like, oh, I only got one helper, and like, to some extent, that makes me want to play again, but to some extent, I'm also like, I wish I could just do more with my little woodcraft shop.
Yeah, I have to say, we've played a lot of games here where it gives you the opportunity to explore different paths. This one really does, in my opinion, and I think that's probably the thing that makes me want to try it again, is to sort of like, okay, I'm going to play it again and see if I can do this one thing. I haven't done the helpers very much. Like I said, I don't think I've ever done the glue. In 5 plays of this game, I've never done that. It's kind of crazy.
I will say, though, too, that one thing, I don't know if you can play this game solo, but I think I would like it a lot more with player interaction. Like I said, my favorite part of this game is the wheel, and I like having different player interaction for it. So with that, it also makes it a little bit harder to get to the table.
For sure. Well, that's how we feel. Tell us what you think of what you heard here anyways. If you've had the chance to play the game, let us know in the comments below. And if you have any questions, absolutely let us know below, and we'll get down there and try to answer what we can. And until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.